A mocking voice. Veteran or just an attention seeker? A man jeered, his phone held high as he filmed the figure in the wheelchair by the window. Curious glances and whispered comments rippled through the cafe. But the man, James Jim Callahan, 71, remained unshaken. His eyes were fixed on the harbor's gray waters, as if gazing into a past no one else in the room could touch. Why did he stay silent? What secret lay hidden in the wooden box he clutched to his chest? 30 minutes later, the cafe door swung open. 6 U.S. Marines marched in, their uniforms gleaming, their presence overwhelming. Laughter died on the lips of the onlookers. The mystery of the man by the window was about to be unveiled, carrying with it a story of courage, sacrifice, and an unbreakable promise. Have you ever wondered, who are the true heroes hiding in life's shadows? Join us to follow Jim Callahan's journey, the man whose quiet strength brought an entire room to silence with the weight of truth. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more captivating and inspiring stories. Every Friday, at precisely 2 p.m., James Jim Callahan begins his familiar journey. His wheelchair glides smoothly along the dark-hued sidewalk, passing scattered maple leaves at the curb, then threading through the soft, slanted sunlight spilling onto Seabrook Street. His destination is the Bayside Brew Cafe, a small coffee shop tucked beside the harbor, its large window framing a view of moored ships and a row of rusted wooden piers. The moment he pushes open the heavy glass door, Jim is greeted by the heady aroma of freshly roasted coffee, mingled with the warm scent of oak. He wheels past the row of sleek, square tables and stops at table number 6, his preferred spot, bathed in light, where he can gaze unobstructed at the vast sea. Emily, his server, who has greeted him with a smile for the past 5 years, gently positions his wheelchair just so. Moments later, the coffee machine hums to life. The grinder whirs, its rhythm a background score to this weekly ritual. Jim has never been late. For 5 years, he has followed the same routine. 1 strong black coffee, no sugar, no cream, a slice of perfectly baked apple pie, its crust crisp, its filling sweetly mellow, and 90 minutes spent watching the ocean. Onlookers see only the sturdy figure in a faded teal cotton shirt and salt and pepper hair, yet his eyes always light up when they turn toward the open water. In those minutes, the shadows of the past vanish. There is only the sound of waves lapping against the quay, distant ship horns, and the comforting warmth of his coffee cup. Jim never reads those letters aloud. He simply traces the flowing letters with his fingertips, as if whispering to those lost souls, "I haven't forgotten. I will never forget." To the cafe staff, he's a symbol of unwavering resolve, courteous, silent, never a complaint, never a missed appointment. They see only a regular patron, loyal to his black coffee and apple pie each Friday. They do not know that Jim carries an unbreakable promise to tell the story of his fallen friends, however dim the photographs or however small the medals. Before losing both legs to a roadside bomb in Kandahar, Jim was an exemplary Marine. He served under the Stars and Stripes in numerous campaigns, witnessing moments of heroism and heartbreak alike. He prided himself on the title Devil Dog and spoke of his fellow Marines with unbridled pride, until that brutal truth spared no one. One dawn patrol, an improvised explosive device detonated roadside. The blast shattered the silence, and Jim awoke to a nightmare unfinished. He could no longer feel his legs, his comrades, never came home. From that day forward, he left the Corps, bearing both physical and spiritual wounds that never healed. His family tried to lift his spirits, but no words of comfort could soothe his pain. He sought out psychologists, tried every therapy, yet his heart felt calloused. Then, one day, he opened that wooden box of painful mementos and made a vow to himself. Each week, I will come here, savor a small sweetness of life, and watch the sea, to remember and to keep living. The route from his small house across the river to the Bayside Brew Cafe may be only 2 kilometers. Yet for Jim, it is a journey of perseverance. Rain or shine, he practices propelling his wheelchair daily, keeping his body in motion. Each wheel track on the pavement reminds him that he still has the strength to move forward, with nothing but his determined arms. A few regulars in the cafe have come to admire Jim's quiet steadfastness. They talk among themselves about his unspoken resolve. He doesn't say much, but he's like an unwavering compass, confided a college student working evenings at the cafe. I wish I had something to hold on to, instead of drifting through life aimlessly. Jim remains unaware of how many lives his story inspires. He simply offers a gentle smile when he overhears their praise. During his 90 minutes by the sea, Jim often revisits the past with each wave. Sometimes he imagines his comrades' laughter. Other times, he sees black smoke rising from a tank. Then he returns to the present, savoring a bite of apple pie and inhaling the briny sea air. He reminds himself that no matter how painful the past, every peaceful moment today deserves to be cherished. An enduring message for anyone still wrestling with inner scars. When the clock strikes 3:30 p.m., Jim closes the wooden box, places it on the table, and grips the wheels of his chair. He takes one last look through the window as a cargo vessel slowly departs the dock, and its horn sounds a hopeful farewell. Passengers wave in goodbye, reminding him that life is a series of meetings, arrivals, and departures. Jim smiles, his heart at ease. He has kept his promise to live on and to continue telling the story of unsung heroes so that the world may never forget. That day, the Bayside Brew Cafe was noticeably livelier than usual. Slanted sunlight streamed through the large window, casting shimmering patches across the oak tabletop. Laughter and whispered conversations mingled with the rich aroma of coffee, creating a festive atmosphere. In the corner by the register, a group of university students, fresh from exams, gathered around, lattes crowned with foam in one hand and phones in the other, capturing their celebration. Chairs at table 4 were pulled and pushed in constant motion, setting a vibrant, youthful rhythm. Amidst this scene, James Jim Callahan appeared both familiar and unexpected. His wheelchair rolled quietly over the tiled floor, its wheels emitting soft squeaks that drew curious glances. Jim wore a worn khaki jacket, an old flat cap perched atop his head. His gaze, deep and steady, remained fixed on the sea. Though his movements lacked their former agility, each push of the wheel spoke of determination. On the table before him lay a small card scrawled with the words, "Veteran, please handle with care." It was not a plea for pity, but a gentle reminder to himself, against the tremors that lingered and the sudden flashbacks when distant booms rattled his mind. Emily, his server, approached with quiet grace. Barely 20, her face still bore the softness of youth, yet her eyes held the weight of student life's challenges. She saw the card, offered a warm smile and a slight nod, then carefully guided his chair to its usual spot by the window overlooking the water. The clink of straw against porcelain and her hushed words to a colleague drifted across the cafe like a soothing melody. "Mr. Jim is here. Black coffee, no sugar, and the apple pie." Jim simply nodded in return, silent, yet his heart warmed at the understanding kindness he knew he could still count on. Within 2 minutes, a pristine white plate was set before him, a steaming slice of apple pie, its crust perfectly crisp, the filling tenderly sweet with a bright hint of tartness, the scent of cinnamon wafting gently into the air. Beside it sat his black coffee, steam spiraling upward, a delicate layer of foam resting on the surface, promising robust flavor. Jim lifted his spoon with a practiced hand, savored a morsel of pie, all while his eyes remained fixed on the slow-moving vessel docking offshore. The waves whispered against the hull, the ship's horn echoed in the distance. Together they wove a tranquil energy that contrasted sharply with the cafe's bustling noise. Yet not everyone showed him respect. At a nearby table, 3 sharply dressed men in business attire chatted briskly. Noticing Jim's card, one elbowed his companion and sneered loudly. "Look at the old man. Must have a special pass to get served faster." They tittered with contempt, their grins dripping with disdain. Emily stood just steps away, coffee pot in hand, her hand trembling as if she might lose her balance. The cafe's chatter fell silent. A few patrons turned their heads, but no one dared to speak. Jim heard them, yet resisted the urge to react. He gently placed his wooden box on the table, the spoon tinged against the plate with a soft clink. His eyes glistened, but his expression remained composed. He continued gazing at the sea, as if seeking solace in its vastness. The leather wrapping his box rustled lightly against the tabletop. Inside lay his gleaming medals, faded photographs, and the stack of letters addressed to the families of fallen soldiers, each item waiting for him to tell their stories. The ringleader of the trio leaned in, his voice a cold rasp. "My grandfather served in Vietnam. Never needed any special credential like that." He slammed his hand on the table, sending ripples across the coffee's surface. The cafe held its breath. Only the ceiling fan's whisper and Jim's measured breathing filled the pause between past and present. Unable to stand by, Emily quietly stepped forward, setting the coffee pot down and bending to whisper, "Mr. Jim, let me—" But she swallowed the rest of her words. Another server, a middle-aged man with a graying beard, frowned as he considered intervening, yet hesitated. All eyes remained fixed on Jim, curious, sympathetic, uncertain. In that moment, Jim leaned forward slightly, his hand resting on the box's lid, his chest hollow with memory. The explosion in Kandahar replayed in slow motion. Burning wreckage, chaotic cries, the instant his legs vanished. Yet here, in this peaceful cafe, he discovered another power, the power of silence and resilience. He slowly lifted the lid, allowing everyone to glimpse the medals gleaming under the soft light. The remnants of his past laid bare before the crowd. Instead of protest, Jim showed them the true value of those medals, symbols of courage, of lives surrendered for freedom. His breath quickened, then steadied, as if preparing to tell the long story. But he closed the lid once more, forsaking the display, and quietly wheeled himself away from the uncomprehending stares. The mockers faltered, regret flickering in their eyes. Some patrons averted their gaze, pretending to busy themselves. Behind the counter, Emily's eyes reddened. She hurried to scoop an extra dollop of vanilla cream for Jim's coffee, then placed a small note by his plate. "On the house. Our apologies." Jim offered a gentle smile, still looking toward the sea, and nodded his thanks for the gesture. For a moment, no one spoke. The Bayside Brew Cafe returned to its familiar rhythm, the coffee machine's cadence, the pizza wheel's whisper, the soft murmur of conversations resuming. Jim finished his pie, inhaled deeply the salty breeze from the window, then rose from the table, pushing his wheelchair toward the door. He left behind more than a veteran card and a wooden box. He left a testament to unbowed strength, a quiet message to anyone who has endured loss, that silence is not weakness, but the power of a heart that endures and carries on. The laughter that had drifted through the cafe suddenly sharpened. From the corner, the taunts of the three suited men grew louder, as if determined to tear apart the warm atmosphere of Bayside Brew. "Fake veteran!" one spat, then shouted, holding his phone high to film Jim directly. The golden ceiling lights danced across Jim's pale face. "Hey, why don't you stand up and grab your own fork, hero?" He jeered as the fork slipped from Jim's grasp, clattering against the floor. That clatter rang like a blade through the heart. Every eye snapped to the gleaming fork on the white tile, then back to Jim. He offered no reply, no sign of embarrassment. Instead, he surveyed the scene like a seasoned warrior, noting the layout of tables and chairs, the gap for his wheels to slip through, and the fork's position relative to the chair leg. The tremor in his fingers, a lingering war wound, flickered, but patience, honed across Kandahar's minefields, surged back as his silent strength. Jim gripped the wheel's rim firmly. With quiet precision, he guided the chair toward the fork. Every millimeter was measured. Wheels avoided the chair legs, brakes adjusted to prevent slipping. The room fell silent, save for the soft whir of his wheels and the steady pounding of his heart, summoning memories of missions past. Emily sprang to her feet, coffee pot in hand. "Let me help you," she urged, breathless. But Jim looked up, his deep eyes holding both battle and loss, and shook his head gently. His warm yet resolute voice cut through the hush. "It's okay. I'm used to it." His refusal spoke volumes. This was no moment for pity. The wheels inched on until the fork's tines caught the chair leg and slid neatly between its bars. Jim leaned forward, hand trembling as he hooked the fork and lifted it back onto his plate, all in silence, yet more haunting than any words. As he settled the fork beside him, his face remained closed, revealing neither triumph nor bitterness, only the composed calm of one tempered by countless storms. Before he could sit, the earlier chuckles had morphed into sharper mockery. The ringleader, gold watch gleaming on his wrist, moved closer, eyes alight with smug delight at spotting the wooden box at the table's edge. "What's in that crate, old man? Toy medals?" He sneered, slurred by drink and disdain, as though the entire cafe hung on his question. In an instant, Jim's hand shot out, gripping the young man's wrist. Not a violent jerk, but enough to startle him. Time stuttered. Spoons paused mid-air, background music froze, the cafe fell deathly still. Jim met the man's gaze. His voice, low and unwavering, declared, "No, it's not like that." The suited man stammered, "He attacked me." Yet no one sided with him. Instead, they sensed the weight behind Jim's steady eyes, the story of a man who faced fire and returned, bearing the blood and bones of his comrades. Silence reigned for another beat. In that stillness, an elderly woman at a corner table lifted her scarf. She recognized the embroidered marine emblem on Jim's lapel, the eagle, anchor, and globe, link between land and sea. Wordlessly she rose, phone in hand, ready to record. Each step was deliberate, affirming that the truth must be seen and heard. Others smiled in encouragement. Emily exhaled, hurrying to stand with the woman lest the moment slip away. The suited men paled, averting their eyes. They realized their mockery had become public condemnation. Jim's marine emblem was more than decoration. It was testament to real sacrifice, to true stories waiting to be told. Suddenly, the cafe's air turned solemn. The doorbell chimed as the sea breeze nudged the glass door, carrying salt and the distant crash of waves. Jim released the man's wrist, eased back to his familiar table, and placed his hand on the wooden box, as if soothing old wounds. Under the warm light, metals gleamed, photographs blurred by time, and the stack of letters lay ready to speak. The stories Jim had vowed to preserve and share. Only the coffee machine's steady hum and the spoon's gentle tap on the saucer remained. Conversations resumed, but now in tones of respect and empathy. Those fleeting moments left their mark. Silence is not weakness, but the latent power of one who endures and honors unsung sacrifices. And James Jim Callahan's story, veteran, keeper of memories and promises, had begun its next chapter beneath the warm glow of Bayside Brew Cafe. The air in Bayside Brew Cafe suddenly grew stifling, as if the space itself had been stretched thin before a gathering storm. The whispering chatter ebbed away, giving way to the harsh snap of a napkin thrown onto the table beside Jim Callahan. The napkin sliced through the air, then landed on Jim's table, trembling in quiet pulses. In the movement, it revealed the edge of an envelope, half concealed in the wooden box lying open before him. On the pale yellow envelope, ink faded by the years still spelled out 3 clear lines. If I do not return, Jim is the one you can trust. The overhead lights cast shadows into the creases of the paper, making the words seem to shimmer in and out of sight. Jim felt a cold breeze slip through his chest the moment his eyes met that silent vow, the last message of a comrade gone forever. Handsome and weathered, Jim closed the box's lid in one smooth motion, his hands, marked by wind and shell blasts, clenching the edge so tightly that his index and middle fingers turned ghostly white, veins rising beneath his skin. For a heartbeat his face darkened, brows knitting as emotion flared like a current. Yet almost instantly, serenity returned. He tilted his head back slightly, as though accepting the napkin's unspoken fury, then took a deliberate sip of his still steaming black coffee. His lips did not curve into a smile, but his gaze drifted to the light beyond the window, where ships still bobbed on the harbor waves. At the next table, the suited man who had hurled the napkin sneered, tapping the box's lid with a knuckle. His eyes flicked over the half-revealed envelope before he taunted, "What's in that box, old man? Toy medals?" His tone, laced with liquor and contempt, cut through the cafe's tense calm. His friends snickered behind him, the glare from their glasses making their cruelty all the more glaring. Yet Jim refused to be drawn into their spectacle. He remained composed, lifting his fork to cut another thin slice of apple pie, golden crust, cinnamon scent rising, as though handling each painful memory one careful piece at a time. Though the cafe held its breath, only the oven's hum and espresso machine's hiss persisted. Jim quietly retrieved the fallen envelope from the table's edge. He placed it gently into the box's hidden compartment, then closed the lid with reverence, safeguarding a sacred secret. Behind the bar, Keller, a regular server in a faded denim jacket, sensed something amiss. Through the slot of the box's lid, fleeting flashes of metal ribbon caught his eye, and he stiffened, his heart skipping a beat as he recognized who sat alone among the crowd. Without hesitation, Keller stepped outside, voice trembling as he dialed. "Captain, it's Keller. Jim Callahan's in the cafe and people are mocking him without restraint. I think you need to know." Inside, the air turned heavier still as the suited men pulled out phones and filmed, then uploaded clips with sensational captions. "Phony hero exposed." Within moments, hundreds of views surged in, comments mocking Jim as a fraud. But Jim, tempered by countless battles beyond any battlefield, kept his composure. He did not lift his head, continuing to cut his pie with meticulous grace, as if the noisy world were nothing more than a distant background hum. Emily hovered at his side, face etched with concern. She whispered urgently, "Mr. Jim, should I call the manager?" Her voice quivered, eyes pleading. Jim placed a steady hand on her arm, his gaze softening. He shook his head, offering a warm smile. "That time is past, young lady." No further explanation was needed. Emily understood that old wounds cannot be healed with apologies or managerial interventions. Outside, Keller found a private corner to record what he'd witnessed. He knew he must share it with someone who truly understood Jim's history. "He's one of the bravest Marines I've ever known," Keller thought. "He's no imposter." As the video spread, messages defending Jim began to appear, some recounting the loss of their own comrades, others praising his unwavering dignity. In that fleeting silence, Jim resumed his afternoon. The cafe still fragrant with freshly roasted coffee, the oven still beckoning with sweet pastries, the distant waves still softly sighing beyond the glass. He looked up through the large window. The afternoon sun gilded the water, and the moored vessels sat like silent witnesses. Jim reminded himself that even if the world points fingers and casts blame, his duty to the past must go on. With that thought, he rose from his table, pushing his wheelchair deliberately toward the cafe's entrance. Emily hurried after him, her eyes alight with determination to help. Unfazed by the crowd's hush or the gazes still fixed upon him, Jim straightened his shoulders, each turn of the wheel marking a step into a future unbowed by mockery. As the glass door closed behind him, a distant ship's horn sounded, and the cafe's clamor fell away. Jim wheeled himself down to the pier, pausing before an old but sturdy vessel. The salty spray washed over his legs like a welcome. There, amid life's waves and storms, Jim Callahan, the veteran bearing promises and memories, exhaled softly, gazing toward the boundless horizon. He knew that so long as he breathed, so long as his wheelchair wheels turned, and so long as stories remained untold, no jeer could ever bring him down. And though the world may hurry to forget, it cannot deny the worth of a steadfast heart and a loyalty that endures beyond the grave. The roar of engines outside exploded through the cafe's tense silence. 4 glossy black SUVs, dusted with road grime and bearing military plates and emblems, skidded to a halt at the Bayside Brew's entrance, followed by a smaller Jeep, the Marine Corps flag fluttering atop its mast. Headlights splashed ragged patterns across the glass, illuminating diners' stunned faces and the cafe's orderly rows of tables. Everyone turned, fear and curiosity mingling, as the heavy door swung open to reveal 6 figures in combat fatigues, polished leather boots, resolute expressions, and eyes as cold and sharp as steel. At their center stood Colonel Harris, tall, silver-haired, immaculate in his dress uniform. His chest glinted with rows of ribbons beneath the warm yellow lights. He swept his gaze across the room, pausing at Jim Callahan's table. The men who had mocked Jim shrank back into a corner, their faces drained of color as they fumbled to delete their videos, only to find fake hero flashing briefly on their screens before vanishing. The air felt as though it had solidified, each breath growing heavier. The Marines advanced in disciplined formation to Jim's familiar spot, encircling him with perfect precision. Colonel Harris masked any visible tension, then lifted his cover in salute. His voice rang clear without a microphone. "Sergeant Callahan, Alpha Company, we apologize for our late arrival." His words resonated through the cafe, sinking into every wooden beam, every chair, every window facing the sea. Jim looked up, surprise flickering in his eyes before serenity returned. He was long accustomed to his comrade's silence. Now, faced with this overdue apology, he simply nodded. No reply needed. Harris addressed the eavesdroppers, raising his tone a notch. Sergeant Callahan led one of the most daring rescue missions in Marine Corps history, Fallujah 2004. 12 Marines were trapped behind enemy lines, under withering fire and in a maelstrom of urban ruins. He paused, allowing the story to settle, so each patron could picture crumbling streets, shattered buildings, and the staccato of gunfire echoing off broken walls. They all wondered how one could navigate a rescue in such chaos. Harris continued, voice catching slightly. When the withdrawal order came, Callahan, disobeying a direct command, returned alone to clear the path, neutralizing the threat so his fellow Marines could escape. He took 2 rounds to the body, yet refused evacuation until every last comrade was safe. A few subdued sobs rose among the customers, their eyes fixed on Jim, shoulders slightly stooped under the weight of painful memories. A young Marine, his scholarly features still evident, retrieved another wooden box from his jacket, slowly lifting its lid. Inside, a Navy cross gleamed under the warm lights, its metal sparks flickering like tiny flames. Colonel Harris stepped forward, meeting Jim's gaze. "I was one of those 12, he said, his voice thick with emotion. "It was your courageous disobedience that gave us our chance to come home." He knelt, placing the medal in Jim's hands with profound reverence. The cafe fell so silent that the soft knock of the box on the table was the only sound. The medal felt heavy in Jim's palm, laden with history and an unrepayable debt of gratitude. The Marines behind Harris formed a line, each rendering a crisp salute. No words were spoken, but their posture and steady eyes spoke volumes. Boundless thankfulness and unwavering respect. The suited men who had mocked Jim dared not meet his gaze. They bowed their heads and shrank back, fully aware of the honor they had so swiftly desecrated. The cafe's patrons held their breath, then erupted into thunderous applause. Emily wept as she hurried to Jim's side, her red-rimmed eyes trembling as she touched his shoulder. You truly are a hero." Jim nodded gently. Moisture shimmered in his eyes, rare tears from a man long accustomed to holding them back. Outside the harbor, a ship's horn answered the clamor. Waves lapped against the quay in time with the applause. A slant of sunset light streamed through the window, illuminating the metal in Jim's hands, turning its silver sheen into a beacon of hope. As the applause subsided, Colonel Harris stepped back, saluting once more before leading his team toward the door. Engines rumbled to life. The Marine Corps flag snapped in the breeze as they departed. All eyes followed until their silhouettes disappeared from view. In the profound stillness that followed, Jim placed the medal back on the table, tracing the wood grain of the box lid with worn fingers. He surveyed the cafe, faces aglow with astonishment, gratitude, and respect, then lifted his gaze to the harbor beyond. The water sparkled with the day's final rays, a reminder that, regardless of life's storms, resilience, and loyalty remain the guiding lighthouses. Jim offered a gentle smile. He whispered, "The promise still stands," then took up his fork to continue the now cool slice of apple pie, as though this quiet moment was the rightful reward for a long and arduous journey. And there, beside the wooden box of memories, the humble hero sat, undaunted, unspoken, yet forever honored. Jim's gaze lingered on the Navy Cross. Its silvery metal sparkled beneath the cafe's warm lights. He tapped the metal's shoulder bar with a steady finger, his voice calm amid the hush. "This honor is not mine. It belongs to those who did not return. I am merely its keeper." Emily stood quietly beside him, her face illuminated through tears. She bowed her head, voice trembling. I wish there were something I could do in return." Jim shook his head gently, a tender smile brushing his lips. "You have given me a place to remember, a sanctuary every Friday. That is more than enough." His eyes turned toward those who had mocked him. One young man, the same who had sneered moments before, now lowered his head and stepped forward. He stammered, We didn't know the whole story. I'll delete the video." Jim met his gaze, voice composed yet firm. "Leave it there. Let people see what happens when they judge without knowing the truth." Those words echoed throughout the cafe, planting seeds in every patron's heart. In that moment, Bayside Brew Cafe became more than a quiet corner by the harbor. It became a witness to loyalty and silent sacrifice. A few days later, table number 6 was adorned with a small metal plaque, "Reserved for Veterans." Beneath the table, a framed photograph was hung, capturing Jim's moment of receiving the Navy Cross, with the inscription, "Not all heroes wear their medals on their chest." Visitors came and wept before the picture, the image of a lean soldier, resolute eyes, humble smile. The following Friday, 6 Marines in dress blues returned. They gathered around Jim, sharing private memories of their comrades, nights spent marching through dusty deserts, final embraces before parting. Jim placed his wooden box on the table, opened its lid, and carefully arranged each medal, each photograph, alongside the worn letters. Slowly, the box came to hold not only mementos of one campaign, but new stories. A small gold coin from a young Marine's hand, a photograph of a fallen friend's gravestone, a single glove finger preserved from an Afghan blizzard. Each artifact was an eternal promise entrusted to Jim's care. Emily did not merely stand by. She initiated the Pay It Forward coffee board, where patrons could pre-purchase coffee or pastry slices for veterans. The idea spread quickly, igniting a warm movement. Strangers buying coffee for Jim and uniformed guests, reminding them that the community remembers and honors them. That evening, videos of the medal ceremony and Jim's solemn moments became an online lesson in empathy, racking up millions of views, viewers commenting, "That is true courage." 6 months later, the bell at Seabrook High School rang to signal after-school hours. Jim agreed to share his story with the students. Upon his arrival, his wheelchair hushed the room into silence. A boy raised his hand. "Why didn't you fight back against the taunts? Why not show them your strength?" Jim offered a warm smile, surveying the attentive faces. "When you cradle a comrade's final breath, when gunfire rings in your ears, and you know their sacrifice relies on your promise, insults no longer hurt." The student's eyes grew heavy with reflection. Jim opened his wooden box, producing each small item in turn. "This is the coin John gave me after he and I escaped a burning vehicle. This is a photograph of Corporal Martinez writing to his wife before deployment. Each keepsake carries a story, a vow that we will not forget and will live on to tell it. The classroom fell solemn. No phones buzzed, no music played, only the sound of quiet, moved breaths. Jim placed his box on the desk. Golden afternoon light filtered through the window, illuminating the wood grain and deepening the sacredness of the moment. Back at Bayside Brew Cafe, Jim resumed his spot by the window. Fridays remained his day, to remember promises and those who had fallen. The cafe, with waves lapping the shore and boats drifting beyond, had become a place where loyalty is honored. Each time Jim glanced toward the harbor, he smiled softly. Real heroes do not seek the spotlight. They keep their promises, whether the world remembers them or not. And within the cozy confines of Bayside Brew, every patron feels the breath of history, the weight of sacrifice, and the warmth of humanity. From the weathered wooden box to the small plaque upon the table, from the thunderous applause to the silent tears, Jim Callahan's story teaches us this lesson. Courage need not be gloriously celebrated. Sometimes, all it takes is a cup of coffee, a slice of apple pie, and a wooden box harboring unspoken promises. What does this story mean to you? Leave a comment below and share your thoughts. Help spread these meaningful tales to your family and friends across the United States.